The desert wasn't quiet that evening. It growled. Wind rushed over the open sands like something angry and alive, dragging long trails of dust across the dying light. The sky was painted in bruised orange and red, as if the sun itself had been wounded and was slowly sinking behind the black outline of faraway hills. In the middle of that endless emptiness, an old wooden shack leaned against the wind. Its planks were cracked and splintered, the roof sunburnt and tired. It looked like a place the world had already forgotten. Inside it, someone was trying very hard not to disappear. She sat on the floor, her back against a thick wooden post, wrists locked in iron cuffs that bit into her skin. Heavy chains ran from her arms around the post, pinning her there like some captured animal. Blood had dried in dark streaks down her forearms, and fresh drops slid slowly over her fingers, falling one by one to the dusty floor. Her name was Rhea. Her breathing was uneven, deep, pulling, rough. Every inhale scraped against the pain in her ribs. Every exhale felt like it might be her last, but she refused to let it sound weak. Her shoulders shook, yet she held her chin a little higher than a broken person should. Her clothes were torn from the struggle. Fabric ripped at the sleeves, dust clinging to her skin, a long cut across her side where someone's boot or bullet had grazed too close. The wound burned, bleeding through the cloth, but still she sat upright, refusing to curl in on herself. Rhea was bleeding, yes, but she was not done. Outside, faint voices rolled over the wind like distant thunder. Men laughing, horses snorting, leather creaking, the ones who had chained her here, the hunters. She closed her eyes for a moment, not to sleep, not to cry, just to keep her rage from spilling over. The air inside the shack was hot and dry, smelling of dust, old wood, and the faint metallic tang of blood. A broken window on the left side let in a slice of dying sunlight that landed across her face, outlining the sweat on her brow and the stubborn set of her jaw. Her wrists throbbed, her head pounded, her body begged for rest, her spirit didn't. Still breathing, she whispered to herself, the words rough but steady, "So the story's not over yet." The chain clinked as she shifted, testing it again even though she already knew how strong it was. Rusty but thick, made for cattle, not for women. The cuffs chewed deeper into her skin every time she pulled, and pain raced up her arms like fire. She hissed once, teeth gritted, then started to laugh quietly. "If they wanted me silent," she murmured, "they should have killed me." The wind pushed harder against the shack walls, making them creak. A bit of sand slipped through the cracks, swirling slowly across the floor as if the desert itself was coming in to watch. From outside, a man's voice rose louder than the rest. "Leave her," someone shouted. "We'll deal with the girl proper when we get back." Rhea's jaw clenched. She knew what "deal with" meant when that kind of man said it. She'd seen it in other towns. Other women, other nights. Her fingers curled into fists. They thought she was finished. A half-dead thing they could return to whenever they felt like having fun. She leaned her head back against the post, staring up at the ceiling. The wood above her was stained from an old leak, the pattern oddly beautiful in its own sad way. For a while, she simply breathed and listened to the chaos fading outside. Boots, curses, laughter, then slowly distance. Some of them were riding away, maybe all of them, maybe not. She had learned one thing about men like that: they never truly left you alone. There was always one who liked to stay behind, one who enjoyed watching fear grow. Rhea closed her eyes again and remembered the moment they caught her, dust in her teeth, a shot too close to her horse, the ground rushing up, hands, too many hands. She had kicked, bit, scratched, grabbed one of their guns and almost turned it, but there were too many of them, and she was only one. Only one, but she had made them bleed first. A small, almost wicked spark of satisfaction warmed her chest for a second. One of them would never walk the same way again. Another would carry her bite mark on his forearm for the rest of his life. They thought they'd taken her freedom. They had no idea she'd already taken pieces of theirs. Slowly, she opened her eyes again. The shack's front door stood half-closed, sun leaking around its edges like a burning outline. For a moment, everything was quiet enough that she could hear her own heart beating, steady, stubborn, refusing to calm down. Then she heard it. Not the rough chaos of several horses, just one, hoofbeats, slow and measured, crunching over sand and stone toward the shack. Her pulse quickened. She straightened her back, ignoring the jolt of pain ripping through her sides. It was always like this, the calm before another test. The hoofbeats stopped. Silence settled again, heavy and waiting. The door creaked. It swung open slowly, letting the dying sun pour into the room, a burst of light so strong it almost blinded her. She squinted, lifting a hand as far as the chain allowed to shield her eyes. A shadow filled the doorway, tall, still, solid. A man stepped inside. He moved with the easy balance of someone who lived on horseback. Dust clung to his dark coat, his hat casting a shadow over his face. His boots thudded lightly on the wooden floor as he walked in, not with the drunken swagger of the others, but with a careful, deliberate stride. Rhea watched him closely. Her body was weak, but her mind sharp as ever. His gaze dropped to her, and the room seemed to grow smaller. He took in the chains, the blood, the way she sat upright despite it all. His eyes lingered on her wrists, then on the wound cutting along her ribs, then finally met her stare. He did not smirk. He did not lick his lips like a vulture. He just looked. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind howled outside, dust scraping against the walls, but inside the shack, everything narrowed to that thin line between his eyes and hers. "You're still alive," he said at last, his voice low, rough, but not cruel. Rhea's lips twitched. "Disappointed?" she asked. His gaze sharpened slightly, a hint of something like amusement or maybe surprise passing through it. "No," he replied, "just impressed." He stepped a little closer, enough that she could see his face more clearly now. Stubble along his jaw, a small scar on his cheek, eyes that carried their own kind of tired. She had seen many kinds of men, weak ones who pretended to be strong, loud ones who were empty inside, dangerous ones who smiled too easily. This one looked dangerous, yes, but not to her, at least not yet. "You ride with them?" she asked, nodding faintly toward where the men had gone. He glanced at the door, then back at her. "I rode near them," he said. "Didn't mean I liked what I saw." Rhea tilted her head. "But you didn't stop them either." That landed. His jaw tightened, and for a brief second, something almost like guilt crossed his face. He shifted his weight, the wooden floor creaking under his boots. "No," he admitted, "I didn't." The wind whistled through a crack in the wall, drawing a thin veil of sand between them for a heartbeat before it settled again. Rhea studied him carefully. Her lungs hurt, her arms screamed, but her voice, when she spoke, was steady. "So what now, Ryder?" she asked softly. "You come to watch the show before you head out?" Or you just want to see if I'm worth betting on? For the first time, a real flicker of a smile touched his lips. You talk a lot for someone half dead, he said. She raised an eyebrow. You listen a lot for someone with a horse still waiting. He took another step toward her. Now she could feel the warmth of his presence. The air between them thickened, not with fear, but with a strange tension. He bent down slightly, just enough to get a closer look at the cuffs around her wrists. The sight of her raw skin made something hard flash in his eyes. They meant to break you, he muttered. Rhea looked straight at him. If I were broken, she said quietly, you wouldn't feel the need to say that out loud. He drew in a slow breath. What's your name? He asked. Rhea. He repeated it under his breath, as if testing it. I'm Cade. Rhea let the name sit on her tongue for a second. Well, Cade, she said, are you the one who put these chains on, or the one who's going to pretend he can't see them? Her words landed like a slap wrapped in silk. He didn't flinch, but his eyes changed. Outside, somewhere far off, one of the men shouted something crude about the girl and fun when we're back. Their voices carried faintly on the wind, ugly and real. Rhea's fingers curled tighter around the chain. Cade glanced toward the sound, then back at her. There was a choice sitting in his silence now. She could see it. You're bleeding badly, he said. Then they should have done a better job, she replied. I'm still here. She shifted again, and this time the pain was worse. Her vision blurred for a moment, black edges threatening her sight, but she forced herself to breathe through it. She would not faint, not in front of him. Not in front of anyone, Cade noticed. His hand moved just slightly, as if he wanted to steady her, but he stopped himself before he touched her. I could walk away, he said quietly, more to himself than to her. Get on my horse. Ride out, never look back. Rhea let out a soft, humorless laugh. Yes, she agreed. That's what men usually do. Their eyes locked again. He did not like what her words showed him about himself, but he didn't look away. Can you stand? He asked. Rhea almost smiled. I can fight, she answered. I didn't ask if you could fight. She sighed, then braced her feet against the floor. Using the post for support, she pulled herself upward, the chain dragging against the wood. Pain screamed all the way up her side, but she bit down on it, jaw clenched. Slowly, shakily, she managed to get to her knees, then to her feet. Her legs trembled, her vision swayed, but she stood. Cade looked at her like he was seeing something rare. You should be unconscious, he said. I don't like missing my own story, she replied. Outside, the riders' sounds began to fade, hoofbeats growing thinner in the distance. The sun had nearly disappeared now, leaving streaks of red across the horizon. Night was coming, and night, in this desert, did not forgive the weak. Rhea took a slow breath and looked at Cade. You wanted to know what now? She said. Here it is. Either you leave me here for them, or you help me walk out of this place. He stared at her, torn between fear, instinct, and something that looked very much like respect. Their leader will kill us both if he finds out, he said. Rhea's lips curled. Then let's make sure he doesn't. For a long, stretched-out moment, all Cade did was stand there and listen to the dying wind, to the last echoes of the riders fading into the dark, to his own heartbeat fighting against the decision he was so used to making. Walk away, survive, forget. But this time, the choice did not feel like survival. It felt like cowardice. And in front of this bleeding, chained, unbroken girl, cowardice suddenly tasted worse than death. Cade exhaled slowly. Then he drew his gun. Rhea's muscles tensed for a second, but he held up his free hand. Easy, he murmured. I'm not pointing it at you. He aimed carefully at the rusted lock holding her chain to the post. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I'm tired of pretending I don't see what's wrong. The shot rang out, bright and violent in the small room. Metal sparked. The lock shattered. The chain fell loose around her wrists with a heavy, final clatter. Rhea flinched as the weight shifted, but then she felt it, the first slice of freedom, not complete, not safe, but real. She looked at Cade, breathing hard. So, she said softly, eyes blazing despite the blood and the dust. What now, cowboy? Cade holstered his gun. Now, he replied, stepping closer, his voice firm, we run before the hunters remember what they left behind. And for the first time since they chained her to that post, Rhea smiled like someone who planned to survive. The last echo of gunfire still trembled in the air when silence swallowed the shack again. The broken lock lay twisted on the floor, its shattered pieces glittering faintly in the dim, fading light. The chain no longer held Rhea to the pillar, but it still wrapped around her wrists like a memory that refused to let go. Her arms shook from pain and exhaustion, her breath sharp and uneven, but the look in her eyes had changed. Before she had been a prisoner who refused to bow. Now she was a prisoner who was about to move. Cade stepped closer, his presence warm and steady beside her. He wasn't touching her, but she could feel him there, like a weight leaning against fate on her behalf. You can walk, he said, voice quiet but steady, not asking, stating. I know you can. Rhea gave a slow, shaky nod. Walking isn't the problem, she whispered. Staying alive after is. Outside, the desert wind roared, and the fading light deepened to purple dusk. Cade peeked through a crack in the wall, eyes scanning the horizon. Far in the distance, he could still see small figures moving, horses kicking sand, men stretching their voices louder than their courage. They're heading toward Black Trail Ridge, he muttered, but two stayed behind and they're close. Rhea swallowed. Of course, hunters always left someone to guard their cruelty. Men like that didn't trust each other enough to leave anything unguarded, especially a chained girl. How much time do we have? She asked. He looked back at her. Not enough, he said honestly. Her jaw tightened. Pain ripped along her ribs, but she forced her breathing steady. So we don't waste any. He stepped beside her, finally offering his arm. He didn't grab her, didn't force her, just placed it near enough for her to choose. Rhea hesitated only a second, then gripped his arm tightly, using him for balance. Electric heat burned through her muscles when she stood fully. The room spun. For a terrifying heartbeat, darkness crept up her vision. No, she whispered fiercely to herself. Not now. Cade steadied her, his hand gentle but firm at her shoulder. Breathe, he said quietly. Slow, don't fight your lungs, make them obey. She did, one breath, then another. The darkness retreated. She opened her eyes again, her expression sharpened back into defiance. I said I can stand, she murmured, and I can. A small smirk ghosted across his face. Didn't doubt it. He guided her toward the back exit, each step a negotiation between pain and willpower. The shack's worn boards creaked softly beneath their boots. Dust swirled around their ankles. The angle of the sunlight shifted one last time, then surrendered completely. Night fell. Wild West nights were different. They weren't gentle. They weren't quiet. They were fierce and full of teeth. As they reached the back door, Cade paused. Stay behind me, he murmured. If someone's waiting, they'll fire at movement first. I'll draw their eye. She gave him a dry look. And get shot for it? He shrugged lightly. If that happens, you run anyway. Rhea almost laughed. If you fall, she said softly, I'll still make sure to drag you into the trouble you started. He blinked at her, then smiled, genuinely this time. Deal. He nudged the door open slowly. Cold night air slid in, brushing along Rhea's wounded skin. The desert had turned dark blue and black, the sky above scattered with ruthless stars. Sand stretched in every direction, a quiet graveyard of footprints and wind trails. And somewhere in that darkness, danger breathed. They stepped outside. The shack stood alone at the edge of a rocky slope. Beyond that, dunes drifted endlessly like frozen waves. Nearby, the dry riverbed Cade mentioned cut through the land like a scar, its cracked earth and broken roots a narrow, hidden path. We go down that way, Cade whispered. Stick close to the rocks. If you fall, I won't, she cut in. He didn't argue, they moved. Every step sent fire through Rhea's legs. Blood slicked down her arm where her wounds reopened. The chain at her wrists jingled softly, betraying every movement. Pain clawed at her skull, begging her to collapse. But she didn't, she refused. Halfway down the rocky path, a voice sliced the night. Cade, the sound shattered the quiet like glass, both froze. From behind the shack, two men emerged, one tall and broad with a crooked grin. The other lean and mean, his rifle already halfway raised. Didn't think we'd catch you babysitting, the tall one drawled. Boss ain't gonna like you playing hero. Cade's jaw tightened. Rhea's heartbeat exploded in her ears. The lean one tilted his head, eyes landing on her wounds, on her barely standing frame, then on the broken chain still dangling from her wrists. Well, I'll be damned, he laughed. She ain't chained no more. His voice slithered. The tall one stepped forward, flipping his revolver in his hand lazily. So, Cade, you decided to grow a conscience tonight, he mocked. Cute, stupid, but cute. Cade shifted slightly, standing between Rhea and their guns. Let the girl go, he said, his voice deadly calm. She's not your fight anymore. The tall man grinned wider. Everything's our fight, he replied, especially when she owes us pain. His gaze slid over Rhea like she was prey on a plate. Rhea met his look, not afraid, not broken. Her stare hit back like a blade. You want pain, she whispered coldly. You'll get it, just not in the way you dream. That rattled him, just a bit. The lean one snarled. Enough talk. His finger tightened on the trigger. Cade moved, faster than thought. The first gunshot split the night in half, lighting the shadows with fire. Sand exploded at their feet. Rhea ducked behind a rock, breath slicing through her chest, her weak arms struggling but her will unyielding. Cade fired back. Sparks flashed. Bullets screamed. The desert lit up in violent bursts of orange light. Rocks cracked under impact. Dirt leapt up like it was alive. Rhea pressed herself against stone, her wounds throbbing, but her eyes burned sharper than fear. Because in that chaos, she refused to be just a girl escaping. She refused to be helpless. She grabbed the fallen chain wrapped around her wrists and turned it from a reminder of captivity into a weapon. One of the men rushed closer, thinking she was too broken to fight. He learned wrong. As he closed in, reaching for her with a grin that promised torment, Rhea swung the chain with everything her bleeding body had left. Metal slammed into his face. Bones snapped. He staggered back, screaming, blood pouring down his cheek. She staggered too, but she didn't fall, not yet, not while it mattered. Cade took the opening, one sharp crack from his gun, the man dropped. The second hunter cursed, eyes wide now, not mocking anymore. Business now, fear edging in. He aimed directly at Rhea. Her heart lurched, her legs trembled, but she stood her ground, even bleeding, even barely alive. Because if she died, she'd do it standing. Cade saw the aim shift. He didn't think, he moved. He lunged forward, grabbing Rhea around the waist, pulling her into a tight shield of his body as the gunshot roared through the night. The bullet sliced past them, ripping into stone. For a split second, Rhea felt his arms around her, firm, protective, not trapping but sheltering. Warm, solid, alive, a shield she never asked for but wasn't ashamed to accept in that moment. Cade rolled her out of the line of fire, pressed against the sand, his breath hot near her ear. "You good?" he rasped. "Still breathing," she whispered back. "Then we're not done." He spun, fired, the final hunter fell. Silence crashed back. Just wind, just breathing, just two hearts refusing to stop. Rhea lay still a moment, chest rising and falling in fierce, trembling defiance. Blood stained the sand beneath her. Her body screamed to give up. Her soul didn't. Cade slowly released her, sitting back, breath heavy. "You fight like a storm," he muttered. She smirked weakly. "Storms don't ask permission to exist." He laughed quietly, relief mixing with awe. He reached his hand toward her, not forcing, offering. "Get up, Rhea," he said softly. "We're not done yet. The desert's not finished with us, and neither are the men riding back." Her fingers slid into his. Pain roared, strength answered. She stood again, bleeding, hurting, unbroken, and somewhere in the dark distance, hooves thundered back. The hunters had realized what they'd left behind, and now they were coming. Night took full control of the desert. The sky stretched above them like an endless black ocean, stars burning sharp and cold, the moon hanging like a distant blade. The wind had grown quieter, but the silence it left behind wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, watchful, waiting. Rhea stood with Cade on the rocky ledge overlooking the cracked riverbed below. Sand clung to her blood-soaked skin. Her body trembled, not from fear, but from exhaustion wrestling her will. Every breath dragged through her ribs like it scraped over knives. Her wrists burned where the chains still hung, stained red, swinging slightly with each tremor of her tired arms. But her eyes still burned like embers refusing to die. Far behind them, carried faintly on the wind, came the sound they both dreaded. Horses, a lot of them. The real hunt was returning. Cade listened, jaw clenched, every muscle in his body tensing. The hunters had clearly found the bodies. The moment they saw broken chains and dead men, they would know. Rhea wasn't prey anymore, she was a problem. And men like them didn't leave problems breathing. "They're fast," Rhea whispered, breath shaky but voice steady. "They won't take long to reach here." "No," Cade agreed, "they won't." He looked at her then, really looked, bleeding, barely standing. Covered in bruises and dust, hair tangled, lips pale, body shaking, and yet somehow still looking like a force of nature holding itself together through nothing but stubborn pride. "You shouldn't be alive right now," he said quietly. She almost laughed. "Believe me, I've heard worse predictions about me." But her legs buckled a little beneath her. Without hesitation, Cade reached forward, steadying her, one hand gripping her arm, the other bracing her back. For a heartbeat, she leaned into him, letting herself breathe in that small moment of warmth, of someone else carrying a fraction of the weight. It wasn't weakness, it was survival. "Easy," he murmured, voice close, low, grounding. "I've got you." She closed her eyes a second, letting strength return through sheer will. Then she straightened again, pushing away only when she was sure she could stand. "I can move," she said. He nodded. "I know. But tonight we move smart." He guided her toward the cracked riverbed, a narrow path between jagged rocks and dry mud. It dipped low, hiding them from sight. The moonlight brushed across the desert, but this trench offered shadow, cover. Not safety, but a chance. They descended carefully. Every step jostled her wounds, each shift of weight sending sharp, burning agony through her ribs and legs. Blood seeped slowly, marking their path like ghostly bread crumbs. Rhea bit down on her lip to keep from crying out. Pain is loud, and tonight they couldn't afford sound. Cade watched her out of the corner of his eye as they walked. She didn't complain, didn't beg for rest, didn't even ask how far. Just kept moving, and every step made him reconsider everything he believed about strength. At last, they reached the bottom of the riverbed. The walls rose above them, jagged rock casting long shadows. Cade stopped and listened again. The ground rumbled faintly. Hooves. Closer now. Rhea leaned against the stone, her breathing uneven, her body screaming for relief she wouldn't give it. Sweat mixed with sand and blood on her skin, the desert night cold against her heat. Cade moved closer to her, lowering his voice. "They're spreading out," he said. "They'll send scouts ahead. If we keep moving in open ground, we'll be spotted." "Then we don't move in the open," Rhea replied softly. There it was again, that quiet fire, that stubborn defiance that refused to let despair sit down beside her. Cade gave a faint, almost admiring huff of a laugh. "You really don't quit, do you?" Her lips curled slightly. "Quitting is just dying before your body does." Thunder cracked in the distance, not storm thunder. Gunfire, a signal shot. "They know the direction," Cade muttered. "They're pushing the hunt toward us. They won't sleep tonight." Rhea swallowed. The sound of the chain brushing her skin grounded her. This wasn't over, not close. "Then neither will we," she replied. They moved again, following the curve of the dry riverbed. Rocks shifted under their feet, sand whispering beneath boots. The air grew colder, biting at Rhea's wounds. Her movements slowed, her body reaching limits even her willpower couldn't ignore. She stumbled. Her knee hit the ground. Pain exploded through her body, white-hot, stealing the air from her lungs. She inhaled sharply, struggling to regain balance, but this time her strength faltered. Cade dropped beside her instantly. "Rhea," her fingers dug into the dirt. "I'm fine," she breathed. She wasn't. Her body shook violently, blood loss clawing at consciousness. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision again, threatening to swallow everything. "Don't you dare pass out," Cade said, more pleading than commanding. "Not now. Not when we're close." She forced out a breathy laugh. "Close to what?" she whispered. "More running." He hesitated, then shook his head. "Close to choosing our ground." He guided her gently to sit against a narrow rock wall. Carefully, so carefully, he tore a piece of his shirt and wrapped it tighter around the bleeding wound at her side. She winced, but didn't cry out. His hands were firm but gentle, not claiming, protecting. Rhea watched him silently for a moment. "You're not the kind of man I thought you were when I saw you walk in," she said softly. He smirked faintly. "And what kind was that?" "The kind who watches," she replied. "Not the kind who acts." He tied the knot tight, then sat back, exhaling. "Maybe I was," he admitted quietly, "until tonight." They held each other's gaze, not romance, not comfort, something heavier and strangely beautiful. Two wounded souls standing against a world that expected them to fall. Then Cade froze. He heard it before she did. Hooves, closer, fast. Rhea tried to push herself up again. Her body protested brutally. Her hands slipped. Pain crashed through her nerves like lightning. Cade grabbed her before she hit the ground again, supporting her with both arms this time. "Leave me," she rasped suddenly. "If you stay near me, you'll die with me." He stared at her like she'd insulted him. "Not happening." "Cade, listen," she hissed. "No," he cut her off sharply. "I've ridden away from too many things in my life. I'm not riding from you." The hooves grew louder. Shouts echoed. Torches ignited the distance. "They're close," Rhea whispered. He nodded. "I know." He scanned the terrain, eyes sharp, thinking fast. Then he saw it. Further ahead, the riverbed narrowed into a tight canyon split, only wide enough for one rider at a time. Rocks loomed tall, shadows deep, a choke point, a trap if used wrong, a lifeline if used right. Cade's jaw set. "That's where we stand," he said. Rhea blinked. "Stand? I can barely breathe." He smirked slightly. "Then breathe angry." Despite everything, she almost smiled. He helped her up again, half carrying her toward the canyon split. Every movement cost her a war inside her body, but she refused to collapse. Each footstep wrote stubborn defiance into the earth. Behind them, torches flickered against the horizon now, men yelling, dogs barking. The hunt had teeth now. Cade supported Rhea against the canyon wall, positioning her just behind a jagged drop of stone, almost invisible in shadow unless someone was right on top of her. "You stay here," he said quietly. "Only move if they get through me." Rhea gripped his sleeve. "If they do, then they'll tear you apart and I'll be next." He gently took her hand off his arm, but didn't let go of it immediately. His thumb brushed over the iron cuff around her wrist. "You're not next anymore," he murmured. "You're never next again." He let go, turned, and stepped into the open at the narrow canyon throat. The wind quieted, as if the desert itself leaned in to watch. From the darkness ahead, figures emerged, torches like burning eyes, riders lined up like shadows of death. At the front, their leader, tall, cruel, eyes like cold knives. A scar dragging down his jaw, he looked at Cade standing there alone and laughed softly. "Well," he drawled, voice dripping poison, "looks like the stray dog came back." Cade's hand rested on his gun. The man smirked deeper. "And where's my girl?" Behind the rock, Rhea stiffened, pain forgotten, fury ignited. She watched him from the shadows, the man who ordered her chained, the man who thought she existed for his entertainment, the man who believed pain defined her worth. Her fingers curled tightly around the chain still hanging from her wrists, not as a reminder, as a promise. Cade's voice cut the night sharply. "She's not yours anymore," he said. The leader's smile fell into something darker. "Oh," he said coldly, "we'll see." He raised his hand. The hunters readied their guns. Rhea closed her eyes for half a second, blood still warm on her skin, pain burning through bones. Fear whispering to surrender, but something louder rose. A fire she didn't ask for, but one she would never trade. When she opened her eyes again, she wasn't shrinking in shadow. She was waiting to burn the night down. And the Wild West had no idea. The real storm hadn't even started yet. Cade stood alone in the narrow canyon mouth, the jagged stone walls towering around him like silent witnesses. The moonlight carved his silhouette into something sharp and unyielding, a lone figure between a pack of wolves and the wounded fire he refused to abandon. Across from him, torches burned in the night like angry stars. Horses stamped and snorted, saddles creaked, fingers tightened on triggers, and at the center of those shadows, their leader smiled. It wasn't a joyful smile. It wasn't even cruel in a loud way. It was cold, slow, intentional, the smile of a man who believed deeply in his own power. "You killed my men," the leader said calmly, voice echoing between the canyon walls. "You stole my property. And you think standing in a crack in the rocks makes you a hero?" Cade didn't answer immediately. He just exhaled slowly, grounding himself in the weight of the gun at his side and the quiet blaze burning behind him in the shadows where Rhea hid. "She isn't your property," he finally replied. "Not now, not ever." Murmurs rippled through the hunters. The leader's brows lifted slightly. "Funny," he murmured, "how everyone suddenly grows noble when they decide they like the way a woman bleeds." Rhea's fingers tightened around the chain at her wrists. Pain surged through her arms, but rage burned hotter. She had been many things in her life, a fighter, a survivor, a wanderer, but one thing she had never been and refused ever to be was someone's possession. The leader slowly dismounted his horse, boots striking the stone with lazy confidence. He walked closer, just enough for his torchlight to throw sharp angles across his scarred face. He stared Cade down. "So here's what happens," he said. "You hand her over, you walk away. I let you pretend you didn't see what happens after. You get to live, you get to keep your shiny conscience. Nobody chases you." Silence stretched. Cade blinked once, then shook his head. No, the word didn't come from fearlessness, it came from decision. The leader's smile vanished. "Think carefully, cowboy," he warned softly. "You're bleeding for something that isn't yours." Behind the rocks, Rhea whispered under her breath. "I belong to no one." The leader's gaze hardened. "Men like me," he said, voice growing colder, "build the West. We take what we want, we break what doesn't behave. That's how the world works." Cade's answer was calm. "Then the world's wrong." The leader snapped his fingers, guns cocked. The night exploded. A storm of bullets tore through the canyon mouth. Sparks burst against stone. Sand leapt into the air. Horses screamed. Men shouted. Cade moved like instinct, rolling behind a jagged slab of rock. He fired back with precision, each shot calculated, teeth gritted as stone chips sliced his cheek. Dust filled the air, smoke mingled with desert wind. Thunder roared without rain. Rhea stayed behind the canyon corner, breath harsh and uneven, body shaking. Every instinct told her to hide, to stay down, to let Cade handle it. But the fire in her chest rejected that. She had not lived this long, bled this much, endured chains, survived humiliation, just to survive quietly behind a rock. She pulled herself upright despite the agony screaming through her ribs. Her legs trembled violently. The chain dragged against stone. Blood slipped down her arm in slow, stubborn droplets. But her eyes burned like something holy. A bullet ricocheted near her ear. She barely flinched. Cade caught sight of her and hissed under his breath. "Rhea, stay back," she shook her head. "No," he snarled, frustration and fear colliding inside him. "This isn't your fight." "Yes," she said fiercely, stepping into the faint light for one terrifying, stunning heartbeat. "It is. It has always been." The hunters saw her, torches swung, faces turned, the leader's lips curled. "There she is," he breathed. "My storm." Rhea's voice cut the canyon, strong despite blood and breathlessness. I am not yours. The words didn't sound shouted. They sounded carved. Into stone, into air, into the night. The leader signaled sharply, "Take her." 3 men broke formation, charging into the canyon mouth on foot. Cade moved to stop them, gun firing, forcing them into cover. Shots sparked. Rock shattered. Sand exploded. One hunter slipped past. He lunged for Rhea. He grabbed her arm. He laughed a heartbeat later. His laugh broke into a scream. Rhea wrapped the chain around his throat and pulled with everything left in her breaking body. Her arms burned. Tears strung her eyes. Pain tore through every nerve. But she didn't let go. He clawed at her wrists. He thrashed. He gasped. Rhea leaned close enough for him to hear her whisper, "Never again." She slammed him backward into stone. He collapsed. She staggered, nearly collapsing herself, but forced her knees to lock, forced her lungs to pull air that felt like knives. Her body was at its edge. Her will wasn't. The leader stared, expression changing, not amused now, not lazy, not indulgent, cold, focused, dangerous. He drew his gun slowly, not fast like a gunslinger, slow like a man who had never needed to hurry to kill. Cade saw him, their eyes locked across the canyon. Cade fired, the leader fired. Both bullets screamed through the air. Cade struck the leader's shoulder, spinning him slightly, but the man barely staggered, fueled by rage. The leader's bullet slammed into Cade. Cade jerked backward, breath ripping from his chest, collapsing to one knee. Pain flooded him like fire swallowed by lightning. Rhea's heart stopped. "Cade," her voice tore the desert. He forced himself upright through agony, blood sliding down his side, jaw clenched so tight it could shatter bone. "I'm fine," he gritted out, breath shaking. "I stay standing." She believed him, not because it was true, but because he refused to let it be false. The hunters regrouped, guns realigned. They advanced. Rhea stumbled to Cade's side, one hand grabbing his coat, steadying him as much as she steadied herself. 2 broken bodies. 1 unbroken will. He looked at her, pain ripping across his face, and somehow still managed a small, burning smirk. "You still breathing?" he rasped. She nodded. "Unfortunately for them," he laughed weakly. The hunters paused, waiting for the leader's command. The leader, blood soaking his side, stared at the 2 of them, these broken, battered fools who refused to fall. His eyes burned. He raised his gun again. "This ends now," he said coldly. Rhea stepped forward. Between Cade and the gun, her body shook like it might collapse any second. Wind wove through her hair, pulling strands across her face. Blood slid lazily down her side. Chains glinted faintly around her wrists. But her posture held a strange kind of beauty, not glamorous, not gentle, not delicate. A fierce, defiant beauty carved from pain and courage and unbreakable will. "If it ends," she said quietly, "it ends with me standing." Silence fell again. The desert listened. The hunters stared. Even the night paused. She raised her chin just slightly. "You think chains define strength," she continued. "You think fear makes you powerful. You think women like me exist so you feel big." Her voice didn't shake. "You're wrong." Her words didn't echo loudly. They settled deeply. "I bleed," she said, "but bleeding is not breaking. Pain is not defeat. Chains don't own me. You never did, and you never will." The leader's lip curled in fury. "Enough." He pulled the trigger. The shot fired. The world slowed. Cade moved despite the pain, grabbing Rhea and dragging them both sideways. The bullet ripped past, grazing Rhea's shoulder, burning flesh but missing bone. She hissed sharply but didn't fall. Cade fired back. This time his bullet didn't graze. It hit. The leader staggered backward, shock flashing across his face. He stumbled, dropped his gun, fell to his knees. Silence crashed. The hunters froze. Their invincible man, their command, their monster bleeding in the sand. Rhea stared at him. He looked up at her, hate and confusion and disbelief twisting his expression. "You were nothing," he choked. She looked at him with something that wasn't triumph. It was clarity. "I was never nothing," she said softly. "You just never learned how to see." He fell. The torches flickered. The hunters hesitated. Without their leader, courage leaked from them like water from cracked glass. One man backed his horse away. Another dropped his gun. Fear spread like wildfire, and then they fled, one by one, then all at once. Horses thundered into the night. Cowards always ride fastest when the power they worship falls. Silence returned, real silence, the kind that comes after storms. Rhea stood trembling, every bone screaming, lungs burning, tears pricking her eyes, but she stayed upright. Cade swayed beside her. She grabbed his arm again, holding him the way he held her. "We are still standing," she whispered. He breathed out a faint, disbelieving laugh. "Yeah," he murmured, "guess we are." Her legs finally gave a warning she couldn't ignore. The world tilted. Pain crashed. Cade caught her as she fell forward, pulling her gently into his chest, lowering with her as both of their battered bodies finally surrendered to gravity. The desert wind softened, cool now, gentle, almost kind. They sat together in the sand, leaning against each other like two halves of a battle not meant to survive, but refusing to die anyway. Rhea's breathing steadied slowly. Cade's hand rested against her back. For the first time since chains clamped around her wrists, she felt something like peace, not safety, but peace. Her voice was faint, tired, but calm. "Cade, yeah, we made it through the night." He smiled weakly. "Yeah," he breathed, "we did." Above them, the sky didn't change, but something in the world did. The desert had watched men like those hunters rule by fear. Tonight it had witnessed something else. Strength not from cruelty, power not from ownership, courage not from control, but from refusal. Refusal to bow, refusal to break, refusal to surrender the soul. And though the wind would someday erase their footprints, it would never erase the truth of what happened here. Somewhere in this brutal, lawless Wild West, a bleeding girl in chains refused to die in silence. She refused to belong to anyone. She stood, she fought, she lived. Glowing star moral strength is not the absence of pain. Strength is standing, bleeding, shaking, terrified, and still saying, "You do not own me. My worth is not yours to define. And I will not break for you." Even when chained, even when hunted, even when the world calls you weak, your soul is yours. And that is something no desert, no wound, no monster can ever take. This bleeding but unbreakable soul deserves your support. Hit the subscribe button, like the video, and stay with us for more intense Wild West survival stories.